All right, I think we are uh, live now. Let's see. All right, looks like we are live right now. Um, okay, we are live right now. Thank you for joining us. For those who are joining us right now, it's my pleasure to have our sister Shea Perry, the mother of Hardel Sherrell. And many of you know, as you all are aware, we are in the middle of the COVID pandemic, but we're also awakening to a pandemic of injustice that's been happening across this country for quite too long. And as we talk about justice for George Floyd, and every day now we learn in the court proceedings that are going on for the Chauvin trial, how difficult it is to present a jury of really the peers of George Floyd, but also just how now we're seeing a system that really needs to be reimagined in many ways. The fact that Black jurors were asked so many questions that immediately made them not sit on the jury compared to white jurors who had relationships or have direct or indirect relationship with police officers are given the discretion that they will sit on the jury and make a decision based on the evidence presented in front of them. But when a Black juror presents their feelings around this case, that they are immediately removed, and it's just unfortunate. But as you can see, the title, today we want to talk about this wonderful event that's happening in Bemidji, and I want to just everyone know that as we are fighting for justice for George Floyd, we're really fighting for justice for all the families in Minnesota. 400 plus families who have lost their loved ones to police brutality. And we need to really understand that this is not an anomaly. This just did not happen on 38th in Chicago a May ago. It's been happening everywhere in Minnesota, and that's really the key in Minnesota and across this country. And so, Shea, welcome. Thank you for continuing to fight for your son. Thank you for continuing to fight for other families. And most importantly, let's talk a little bit about this event Saturday in Bemidji, which is about 3.5 hours to 4 hours away from the Twin Cities, in Beltrami County, the county prison where your son was killed due to negligence. So can you tell us a little bit about the event first, and then we can kind of dive in a little bit more about your case, your son's case.
Yes, well, first of all, I just want to thank you and thank God for allowing me to come on and speak to your listeners. I'm very grateful, very honored to be here. Thank you. And as you said, this is a fight, not just for George Floyd, but there are so many George Floyds in Minnesota, and they need to be exposed. And that's why we are going to Bemidji. My son was in the Beltrami County Jail in 2018, August of 2018, where a few days after he was in custody, he had fallen out of his bunk. And he called me crying, saying his back hurt really bad, and that they didn't believe him. They thought he was faking it. They kept saying, "Oh, you're faking it." And I knew that when my son called me crying, it was serious, because my son had a very high tolerance for pain. So I knew something wasn't right. But this would go on for several days. And so after the 9 days of him being medically neglected until his death is why I fight today, and why we are going up to the Beltrami County area is because my son's case is not an isolated case. You see, there are several individuals, and we have just found out now 7 people have died as some kind of lack of care, neglect, abuse, whatever it might have been. They died on their watch, and they should not have. They should be here, especially my son. And because of what he had, it was treatable. And that's why I say that. If he had gotten the care that he was supposed to have gotten, he'd be alive today. So I'm going up to Beltrami County to help the other mothers and families give a voice to their loved ones who have succumbed at the hands of the corrupt law enforcement of the Beltrami County Jail. And we are getting a lot of attention here in the cities, which is good, and it should be. But then these folks way up north, primarily Native American folks, they aren't getting the coverage that we're getting here. So I felt that it was my responsibility, because that's where my son passed, that I needed to reach out to continue to help them, as I have done over the last couple of years. But this month was crucial in that I went up there to help bring an awareness of what is going on in Minnesota overall. And so it just saddens me that this continues to happen in the Beltrami County Jail. Even after my son, let me just say, after my son's death, there was yet another death. There were actually two deaths. But the one following my son, his name is Bruce Lundmark. And I happen to know the family. They will also be there as well. But Bruce Lundmark got sick in the Beltrami County Jail, and he was doubled over in pain. And this would go on for, I think, a couple of days. And instead of them giving him the medical treatment that he so deserved, they quickly rushed him to another jail. And within the time of him being booked in, he dropped dead. There's definitely something wrong with that picture. You have medical staff. You have a doctor by the name of Dr. Todd Leonard, who is the CEO and, of course, the doctor over a lot of facilities in Minnesota. And it's called MEND. And we've been trying to, bring the attention to the medical providers, the doctor, the board of doctors, and the medical board of nurses. We went out and rallied last year trying to get their attention to say, hey, how is this guy still working? How is it that he's still providing so-called care where there are people still dying under his watch? And then there was yet another man that we just recently found out that died in the Beltrami County Jail. And I believe it was a suicide. And, I have to tell you, Jelani, I have had people, some very rude, very mean people, say to me, well, what was he doing in the jail in the first place? And I said, it doesn't matter. It is irrelevant why he was there. He was supposed to have been given care, and his constitutional rights should have been upheld while he was there under their care. So it is irrelevant why he was there. My son was no monster, by the way. But yes, he made some mistakes, but let that not be the focus. People want to focus on what he did and why he was there. But what we really need to do is put our focus on why people continuously die in the Beltrami County Jail and other jails throughout the state of Minnesota. But, MEND has to be held accountable. The people involved in my son's death have to be held accountable. So we do have, we are involved in an ongoing litigation right now. But here we are, 2.5 years later, still
Absolutely.
no type of justice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Nobody,
so
I'm sorry. I just wanted to add real quick, Jelani.
go for it.
Nobody's been suspended. Nobody's been fired. Nobody's been reprimanded. The doctor still has his medical license. No licenses have been taken. And 2.5 years later, and we're like, what is the holdup?
Right.
It's just not right.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And as you explain that, can you talk a little bit about, it's interesting that, one of the things that's consistent in all of the stories of the countless families, number one, unless you have a video like the video you had with George Floyd, the video you had with, Philando Castile, and even that video was not, the kind of video that you want to see, but still a video, right? You have the countless families who didn't have a video, the countless families who also, it occurred much earlier when we were not so aware or became more aware since the killing of Jamar Clark and Philando Castile, and now with Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and so many countless lives of national attention. The families who didn't get the attention, I think to one extent we blame our community, but we really blame the infrastructure, the media. And so speaking to that, here's an opportunity now where, KARE 11 has been doing an investigative. And it's interesting that someone like you, who's fighting for your son, the activists and community groups working with you, all of them are not able to move the dial until the media comes in and showcase. And that moment, all of a sudden now, you see some changes. So can you talk a little bit about that KARE 11 articles and investigations that they did, and how powerful they have been in kind of moving the dial forward, and also how much work you had to do to convince people to just listen to us, believe us, and listen to us?
Yes. Well, when we first came out with our story, Fox 9 News, Paul Bloom was covering it. But and he did a great job, but we needed more coverage. And I kept saying, we need 4, 5, 11, we need them all to come and listen to what is going on. And I kept saying, this is not an isolated incident. This is an ongoing, let me just say this, the real pandemic isn't COVID-19. It is systemic racism. Yes. And it is running rampant here in the state of Minnesota. Yes. Every system needs to be overhauled, changed, policies, procedures just changed. And I have to keep pushing. And when I called KARE 11, because I was calling a lot of the different media outlets and KARE 11 and the primetime news channels, saying, hey, this is my only child. This is who I am. He was pretty much murdered. He was left to die alone, starving to death, nothing to drink. He walked into the jail. 9 days later, he's carried out in a body bag in Depends.
9 days.
9 days. Urine and feces filled Depends. And he lay on that floor and he starved to death. It was just inhumane. They treated my son worse than a dog. So I finally just kept praying and asking God to send me somebody that would tell the story in the way it needed to be told. And he answered my prayers, because then he sent me AJ Legault. And AJ Legault has done a series of these stories. And when we found the DOC records, let me back up. The senior, so-called senior inspector, Gray Croucher, who did my son's, inspection on my son's death, came back after maybe 2 months later, and said, oh, there were no violations. Well, I knew that was a lie from the pit of hell. And I was determined to find out the truth. And I said, no, something's not right. This isn't adding up, because my son called me from jail crying and saying to me, Mom, you have to get a lawyer and have them look at the video cameras because they're mistreating me in here. I had no idea the mistreatment that he was talking about. But now, of course, all the world has seen the mistreatment of what happened to my son through the eyes of KARE 11 News. And what AJ Legault has done has been phenomenal. However, I have to pay credit to Nico and Georgia Fort with Unicorn Riot. They were the actual ones that came out and took my interview and put it on blast for the world to see. And I did that purposely. I had to make the decision of allowing people to see the truth, the ugly truth of what they did to my son. It was like Emmett Till's mom opened that casket. She had to make that executive decision, as hurtful and painful as that was, for her to see her baby boy lying in that coffin. Just, oh my gosh, the images of how they brutally drug him and did horrific things to his body was just insane. And I had to make people realize that this is another Emmett Till story. This is still very real. And once AJ Legault saw what Unicorn Riot did and how many views it had gotten, he grabbed hold of the story and ran with it. And now he's been showcasing all of these different videos, and he has been doing that for the last several months. And thank God, because then that helped to put pressure on, Attorney General Keith Ellison, the governor, and they finally agreed to allow the U.S. attorney to take a look into what was going on in my son's case. And now, only after I pounded so much pavement, after a year or so of going out rallying and protesting, I'm grieving and I'm hurting and I'm fighting. I'm grieving and I'm hurting and I'm fighting. And I'm like not getting anywhere. And it didn't seem like anybody was listening to me. So I kept praying and I kept praying and I kept praying, because the God that I serve, I know that justice will be served and it will prevail. Because I'm not looking for man's justice. I am looking for God's justice. But in that, AJ Legault saw something and said, oh my gosh, we got to look into this even further. So as he began to look further and further, then it was, they agreed. The governor, the attorney general got the U.S. attorney involved, and then they got the FBI involved. So now my son's case is being investigated by the FBI, only because I kept pushing, kept going, kept asking questions, kept doing research, kept telling people, calling anybody that would listen to my story. And so now here we are waiting for the FBI to complete their investigation, which I'm thinking it should be, done pretty soon, because they took the case in July, in the middle of July. So I'm expecting that criminal charges are going to follow, and then convictions there shortly thereafter, because what you see in the videos that you're going to share are just unbelievable. And it's almost as if this is happening in a third world country, but it happened right here in the United States of America, where we have the finest medical care, but yet my son was denied any medical care, and he was denied his basic constitutional rights. And they need to be held accountable for that. They absolutely need to be held accountable for that.
Absolutely. And I put the link for folks to follow up on.
Yes.
So feel free to look at that at the KARE 11. There's a lot of videos on there,
yes.
Step by step, and you can see the evidence that they were able to pull forward and see the power of media. When the media works, you can expose what's been happening here. And to your point, it's a lot of burden for you and your family to carry that, while we have an entire department of DOC that is responsible for for investigating this. We're supposed to have our state, when something goes wrong, the state is supposed to take lead and use all of those resources to make sure crimes don't happen through state violence. And unfortunately, this is something we have seen for far too long, continue to happen over and over and over. And it's time that we all band together and realize we really need to work together.
Yes,
we need to really put pressure to make sure that this doesn't happen. And to your point, this has been happening, as you said, to a lot of Native Americans, particularly in northern Minnesota.
Yes.
And other families. And this is, as much as these crimes impact disproportionately people of color, particularly Black men, particularly Indigenous men and women, and other immigrants and poor people. This is also impacting white people as well. And so this is not a black and white issue. This is state violence that needs to be dealt with and addressed. And so it's interesting that if we go back a little bit to the event now, and people are asking, so we are, this is going to be Saturday in Bemidji, not Minneapolis. We need to drive up there. If you can drive up yourself, you can. We do have a bus leaving at the CARE office at 11 a.m. So if you're interested, please let us know. There's some information that is on the Facebook event page, and I'll post that also on our chat here, so that you can look into that. It's also part of a lot of our Facebook pages. If you go to the event page there, you can find it's this upcoming Saturday. So those who want to just ride with the rest of us on a bus, we do have a bus heading up there. We're also encouraging other folks to, if you have loved ones and friends in rural Minnesota that are much closer, to come out and support, show their solidarity and support. As you could tell, the majority of these families are predominantly, white families who are disproportionately also themselves impacted, especially in rural Minnesota. And so, can you talk a little about some of the families and kind of what we expect for the event on Saturday?
Yes, absolutely. Well, as I had said, because of the fight that I've been, so just getting my boots on the ground, I've actually reached out to several of the mothers and families of those whose lives of their children or loved ones who were stolen. And Stephanie Bunker of the Beltrami County Jail, she and her family is going to be there. The Tony May Jr. family is also going to be there. He was also another person who died in the Beltrami County Jail. Bruce Lundmark, who was initially, like I said, sick in the Beltrami County Jail, but they were trying to be slick and hurry up and move him to Clearwater, where he dropped dead in booking. But that's another case. And then we have Naj Howell, who died in the Hennepin County Hennepin County Jail. He was arrested and taken out of the Hennepin County Medical Center and taken into custody. And, he was having some mental health issues and ended up dying. Like, they didn't care to try to help this young man. It's just, these stories are so similar and they're just devastating. And then, of course, you have Hardel, my son. And so we all got together and I said, I need to come up and show support and love to you all. And so they're all going to be out there. And some of these mothers and families have never spoken publicly, and they are willing to do it because they saw what happened to my son. And they said, oh my gosh, they were just shocked as to what happened, and to my son, because my son's death was so egregious. And they said, well, my goodness, if you can go out and do it and have the strength to speak up, we at least have to go out and stand in solidarity with you. So I'm just thanking God again for answered prayer, that these folks that I've been trying to reach out to for the last couple of years, some of them are finally being receptive and are going to be up there. And so it's a bittersweet. I'm happy, and of course it's a sad situation, because anytime I go to the Beltrami County Jail, for me, anytime I go up in that area, it's like going to a cemetery, because that's where my baby's last breath, that's where he took his last breath. So it's very hard. But in that process, we began to come together and began to talk about, what can I do? What can I do to turn my pain into purpose? And Be Their Voices was birthed out of all of what has happened to my son. And Be Their Voices is a nonprofit organization in where we are actually giving a voice to the voiceless. So those that are incarcerated or have been incarcerated and ended up, being killed or murdered, those that were neglected or mistreated, in that our mission is to give these inmates and the family members of the deceased a voice. And so we have partnered up with these families, and we will help them seek justice by whatever means necessary, whether it be, rallying and protesting, as I've done, going in front of the media to have anybody listen to what is happening, help them to, get their bills. If there are legislative changes and policies that need to happen, because we've been working with legislation now, we will be helping the families with that. And, it's just a process, but we will, of course, be going into the jails at some point, providing ministry, prayer, mental health services, and, legal advice if need be. But we are so elated that finally somebody is doing something about legislation, where we actually teamed up. My lawyer and I talked about what changes we wanted to see come out of the DOC. And they, as of February 11th, drafted up a huge 3-page memorandum that went out to all the licensed facilities, okay, and detention facilities, as well as the inspections and enforcement unit, along with the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, with the changes that myself and my attorney helped to draft up. And this language is also in the 13-page bill that we are prayerful that it will pass the Senate. It has currently and unanimously passed in the criminal justice, public safety and criminal justice department, or committee, I should say, excuse me. And now it's going on to the Ways and Means Committee. And so we're just praying that it will eventually go to the Senate and it will pass. It needs to pass because laws have not changed in jail settings or the like for over 100 years. And that's ridiculous. You've got these laws that have been sitting on the books for over 100 years and nobody's done anything about it. So, we are very optimistic that they will finally get adopted, and some real change will come as a direct result of what I've done, and the people like yourself and so many other organizers and activists who have come behind me and helped push me to get my story out there. And I'm just so grateful, because I certainly could not do it without you all. And of course, God himself.
Absolutely. And, we trust in God, that God gives us the guidance and the support and understanding and the wisdom behind what we need to do. And so I'm really glad. And I want to echo what you said. I really encourage everyone to take the time. If you're not able to come with us and spend the day in northern Minnesota advocating for families there, then at least you can support, share the event, check in with your friends who live in rural Minnesota, who might be a short drive for them. For those who are worried about driving up there, we have a bus that is leaving the care offices on 25 and East Franklin at 11 a.m. So we have limited spots. If you're interested, please go to the event page and you will learn more. And for the countless families and others, we are trying to pass meaningful legislation. So you can actually do that right now. Go to pull out your cell phone and then text number 2 to this number, 612-200-2550, which is on the bottom of your scroller here, that you could do that. Can you talk about the bill that you're working on and kind of where that is at right now?
Yeah, actually, and again, I'm just so grateful for this opportunity. But we've been working on getting things like well-being checks that are properly executed and documented, because that has been a huge issue. As the video that you're going to show, my son at one point fell out of his bunk and lay on the floor with his arm caught underneath him because he was becoming paralyzed for 8 hours.
Mm.
Jelani, that is unacceptable. And these are the kinds of policy changes that are coming now in the DOC, and this language is in the bill. And it's House File 1267, and the chief author of the bill is Representative Long. And they actually unanimously voted to turn this bill into Honor My Son. They changed it, they amended it, and it's now called the Hardel Sherrell Act. So we're making some progress, but we still got a long way to go. We want to have them no longer have the ability to do their own investigations when there is an in custody death. Right now, they're investigating their own deaths. Not good, because obviously there's no want them to have issues done. We are seeking, strong collaboration with the sheriffs and the jail administrators through the DOC. And they've also, because they're talking about shared accountability and nonprofit providers, because I had one point said to Paul Schnell, we need to be involved in this whole process. Not that I'm ever going to walk in Beltrami County Jail, because I won't, but there will be other jails, because I am an ordained minister. That is primarily what I'm called to do, is to, go in and minister to these hurting men and women, young adults, that there's a different way, and that they don't have to be subjected to this, neglect and abuse, and how we can help them to get, health and wellness, to get out of the system, and it's very hard, because probably better than I do, once you're in the system as a Black man, it's very difficult to get out.
Absolutely.
And it's almost as if they keep you there because it's all about what? Money. They can keep you in the system, they're making money. So there's a lot of changes that we are trying to bring about, like I said, within the DOC, and of course, this Hardel Sherrell Act. It just can't be a watered down bill where people are like, well, what good is that? It's not going to change anything. No, it has to be a bill that saves lives. We cannot continue on this path of allowing those that are in a position of authority to abuse that authority.
Yes.
They have to be held accountable. I can't preach it enough. Yes.
No, I think that's well put, well laid out. Again, I want to remind folks this event on Saturday, and then I want to be very clear to folks. There's not a lot of events happening in rural Minnesota around this work.
Yeah. Right.
So if you're wondering when's the next event, this might be one for a while. There are smaller events regionally happening. So when you get a chance like this, for an event like this, to have that many families showing up, asking folks to show up in solidarity, it's worth the while. It is a whole day event. There's 4-hour drive there, 4-hour drive back, and obviously a couple hours for the event. So, but you're going to be part with a large number of folks who are also driving from here or getting on the bus. So I really encourage folks to take part in this event. I want to thank our sister Delcia for really standing up for for standing up for her son, but also for standing up for all of the victims, particularly in the area that I know a lot of people ignore, which is in the prison system. And as I was telling you, I think a couple of days ago, it's a darkness that we have created. It feels like the story of Jonah. Put in darkness and not having a place to be seen. But at the end of the day, we all know we have God on our side, and calling out to God for relief is important, and justice. And so it's important that we fight for folks who are incarcerated. And we know the same system that is causing police brutality is the same system that's creating a great deal of discretion on who to arrest and how to arrest. And so we've seen that mass incarceration. We are guilty of that as a country. We have worst record, worst disproportionate rate for people of color. And we haven't done anything about it significantly. It is unfortunate that President Trump, of all presidents, have had biggest impact on police on incarceration policies than any other president, and that's just it just doesn't make any sense that all of the Democratic governments and all the different Republican governments, administrations, I would say, have really failed to address this particular issue of mass incarceration. And our president right now, Biden, is guilty of the 60s and the 70s, war on drugs that really became war on Black people, that incarcerated more Black men in any other time. So, we have to protect people, and the most vulnerable are people like your son, who was in prison, and then not to have the just a basic due care, taking care of people, and leaving him for 8 hours to die in that manner. It's just completely shocking. And it's interesting, we have the evidence. We know George Floyd was killed 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and here's your son 8 hours being, not taken care of and neglected to the point where he died and was killed. So,
6 days. 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Right,
it was 6 long, agonizing days.
Yep.
I mean, I can't even imagine, Jelani, what was going through my son's mind.
Right.
During the last few days. Like, wow, is this where I'm going to die? Because your psychic begins to mess with you. And
Absolutely.
I can't even imagine that poor baby was thinking, wow, this is going to be it for me. This is where I'm going to die.
Yes.
Because he knew they weren't going to help him. He knew that. And so, like I said, I have to continue fighting. That's why I started Be Their Voices organization. And, it's hard, having to be in the position of a hurting mother and then have to be forced to fight and go and talk and tell this person and that person and this person. And I'm glad to see that there was some small form of justice for George Floyd's family.
Yes.
But no amount of money is worth what they have put us through.
Absolutely.
You can't even. It's just unbelievable. It's never going to be enough. It's never, ever, ever going to be enough because our babies are gone. They're never coming back.
Absolutely.
And that's why I have to, push for legislation, and I have to, do whatever I can to make people hear my voice. And our website is getting ready to be launched, hopefully this weekend, where people can go and make donations and support Be Their Voices.
Absolutely.
For these people, who are going through what I'm going through right now. And it cost, prior to you getting involved and several other people, I was going up there on my own dime, paying for, gas and food and what have you out of my own pocket. And it gets expensive, when you keep going, and doing and putting these events together with no funds. So we are hopeful that if people cannot make it to the event, that they would at least think about donating even $5, any amount will help us to continue the fight against as it has hit the jails, the county jails, and the prison systems.
Absolutely.
We have to focus on every system because they're all connected. When they get arrested, if they live to go to jail, they live to go to jail, that's where they go. And then this is where they're treated like dirt.
And it's interesting, and you know, it's interesting, and I mentioned this a lot. You know, it's here in Minnesota, you know, we have a history of having immigrants from Norway, Norwegian, and folks from the northern part of Europe. And if you go right now to Norway and Sweden and some of these countries, and you go to their prisons, you will not recognize it. You would not recognize them as prisons. You would be like, no, this looks like a college campus. You know, this looks like a resort. And it's because they've seen that if you're interested in rehabilitating people, if you're interested in giving people a chance, a way out, you treat them in a manner where you are preparing them to be better people than the people that when they enter it. And for us, we've created a corporate-based inhumane system that literally does not help, and in fact exploits people. You know, we are still the highest phone call you can make, the most expensive phone call you can make is an inmate calling their family. I mean, you already made it difficult for them. They can't see their family, but you can't even allow them to call a family member. I mean, think about what we have done in this country, and who's profiting off of that? It's not even the state.
Right.
Private companies offering these services who are charging the state ridiculous amount of money. So this has always been a corporate, you know, greed that has driven the prison industrial complex. And I think, you know, Michelle Alexander did a wonderful job, I think, as one of our leading advocates around criminal justice reform. And I encourage everybody who is learning about this system to really read her book and her work and follow her work. She's done an immense job on that. So absolutely, I guess we'll end it there. I hope to see some of you join us this Saturday. Please support the work that Delshia and her organization are doing, being the voices for these voiceless people right now. Stay tuned for her website and continue to support the work you're doing. Delshia, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for continuing to be a light for your son, but also for many other families. Just know that we have your back. There are many people who have your back, and we'll continue to do that. For all of you who's watching us, thank you so much. Please do the least you could do if you're not able to join us. Share this video so other people can benefit from it. With that, thank you.